Joining us now live from London. You can find her at asymmetrica.com. That's her company. She's a world traveler. She's an expert in the Southern Hemisphere, but she knows a lot that's going on. She spent a lot of time here in the past couple of weeks in the United Kingdom following the Brexit Theresa May debacle. Joining us now, Vanessa Neumann. Vanessa, great to have you.
Great to be on. Thanks. It's a pleasure, always.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy early Thanksgiving to you. I'm glad to hear you're taking a couple of days off.
When do you come back?
You've earned them.
Thank you. I have. When do you come back to the States?
I come back actually on Black Friday for a couple of days, and then I'm off to Brazil again for the launch of my book down there. They're launching, Blood Prophets is launching in Brazilian Portuguese, and I talk about Hezbollah and corruption and contraband, my usual stuff down in Brazil. So, and then I'll be there for the month of December and Christmas and all that. So looking forward to it.
Well, I have to come down and do my radio show from down there one day. Maybe. When is the inauguration of the new president?
January 1st, which I always think makes sort of for a hard New Year's Eve. If you're the president, then
don't you
have
think?
To get sworn in on New Year's Day.
Has it always been that way?
It cuts short your festivities, doesn't it?
Yeah, has it always been that way in Brazil?
Yeah, always. And I guess, I suppose there's a certain, rather romantic notion, new president, new year, but yeah, it's always been like that. It's a little unusual, but it's good.
All right, well, it's going to be an interesting.
He's going to be tough because they call him Tropical Trump. And I think he's going to have a very tough, and he's going to be a very tough president and should be quite successful. He's got a big mandate. Unlike where I am now, Theresa May, the Prime Minister of England, she may be out of office before he come back to the States.
Well, tell me what's going on. Give us an up-to-date version of what is happening with Theresa May and the Brexit negotiations and the status right now of her government.
Right. So you might have recalled that, a couple of years ago, they had a vote for Britain to leave the EU, right? So the European Union. So the UK is part of the European Union, which means that you have free movement of goods, free movement of people. The rules for investment. One of the things that makes the UK so wealthy and powerful is that they're the heart of the financial sector in Europe, right? So you have like Wall Street in New York and then what they call the City of London, right? Mm-hmm. So it was the heart of all of Europe for that because all the bank headquarters are in London and they can represent all of Europe. It's a thing called passporting. It's sort of a financial technicality. But that's one of the things that's under threat with Brexit. So they voted, they said, look, after the Syrian migration crisis, they said, we want more control over the movement of migrants, and we don't want to be giving all this money to Europe, and we want out. So they always kept their own currency. So they're like, we're sort of halfway out anyway, because they weren't part of the euro. They had everything else. So now it turns out that 2 years later, it's like negotiating the worst divorce ever. The Europeans are like, well, sure, you want to leave, but you've got to pay us like $15 billion a year for the next several years as compensation. And guess what? If you want to still do trade, that's not going to happen. If you want to do trade, you also need to take the migration. You can't sort of have borders for people, but not for goods. So now what has happened is everybody's unhappy, right? So the people who voted by a tiny, tiny, tiny majority, like 0.1%, to get out of Europe are like, dude, what are we still doing here 2 years later? Mm-hmm. Why are we not out? And then Theresa May came back with a deal that she negotiated, and she's now submitted it to the Parliament. It's 585 pages. As people are reading it, and they're like, we don't like this. We don't like any of this. And she said, look, this is the best deal I could get. The accusations are that she never really wanted to get out of Europe, so that she's really a Remainer at heart. So now you have people say, get rid of her, and, you know, she's got 25 letters for a vote of no confidence that we know of. It takes 48 to something called the 1922 committee to, you know, have a vote to replace her. But replacing a prime minister right now is like not going to make the negotiations with Europe go any better. So it's a really difficult situation where the entire country is unhappy. There's nobody. The people who want to remain are unhappy. The people who want to leave are unhappy. And she's facing a revolt within her own party.
So the Brits voted out of Brexit 2 years ago. Everybody remembers that. That was kind of the catalyst for some pieces of the Trump campaign back when it happened. And a lot of people were celebrating that believe like me and not going the globalist route. So the Brits voted for this. 2 years later, they're still negotiating an exit. So what you're saying is that Theresa May, never really in favor of getting out of Brexit, has negotiated this long 585-page document that basically is out of Brexit in name only. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yeah, basically. So, you know, they still have to pay, you know, the European Union. They get to keep, you know, some of their financial rights. What I was talking about, the passporting of, you can have your office in London and still represent all of Europe for your bank, which is critical to the UK, because that's basically what they do. They're not an industrial nation anymore. They're a financial services nation. And it's you know, she always campaigned that she wanted to stay in Europe. But now since she's prime minister, she's like, I'll follow the will of the people.
Right. The
people voted to get out, and we're going to do that.
Right.
But this is not making anybody happy at all. And so the question is, you know, do they get rid of her or not? Now, if they get rid of her, and then you have the question is, nobody, the other side, which is the socialist side, Jeremy Corbyn, who's really a socialist. I mean, he's taken the Labour Party way left from where it was with Tony Blair. He doesn't like Europe either. So there is no scenario where the UK can now stay in. But if they crash out and they have like what they call a hard Brexit, which is just say, listen, no deal. We're just going to put up our borders and we're going to put up our trade tariffs, then they have no trade deal. And the U.S., for instance, can't negotiate with the UK, or Australia can't negotiate with the UK their bilateral trade deals until they know what they're dealing with. Because it's like I'm going to do a merger with your company, but I don't know who the CEO is. I don't know who the business, you know, what the business model looks like, and who's your chief financial officer. You have no idea. So it's really bad for the UK. And in the meantime, 80% of those companies that they want to keep in the UK, they said, you know, this is going on too long. We have to manage our risk, and we're out of here. So their economy is about to get hit really hard.
So what's the end game here for May? From what I'm understanding is you don't think that her government will fall over this. So what is the end game? I mean, she's trying to do the will of the people. She can't get a deal done. You're saying that Labor, led by Jeremy Corbyn, who's very left-wing now, doesn't want any part of Europe. So what's the solution?
I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I think they're going to have to the solution is I think they're going to have to take this deal that she's negotiated. You know, crashing out with no deal is not going to be good for the UK. This at least allows you to have some predictability of what you're going to do, and then allows them to then start negotiating, you know, with the Trump administration and start negotiating other, you know, bilateral deals, which is exactly what Trump is doing, right? Getting out of the globalist institutions and negotiating bilateral. So I think they're going to have to take it. The question is, how is it going to impact, you know, a general election going forward next year, which is probably going to be next year. And that's going to be the only real path forward is to sign it and move on. But in the meantime, letters of no confidence keep pouring into this committee. So the question is, might there be the 48 letters? Will they have a vote? And will she survive or not? My prediction is that she will survive a vote of no confidence if they have it, and that the parliament will have to take this deal. They'll sign it. They're not going to be happy with it because it costs them money. They don't get control of the migration the way they wanted. And also there's a problem because they also have Northern Ireland, don't forget. So, and if, the problem is that they also lose, like Northern Ireland, Scotland, and the Republic of Ireland are all going to stay in Europe. So they're going to become Little England instead of becoming the United Kingdom.
Right.
Like England is going to shrink. And so this is really the end of an era for this country. It's very, very sad. But she's between a rock and a hard place. And this is it. So
the alternative to a bad deal is no deal and a hard exit, which you say the UK in a worse position.
Yeah, it puts them in a worse position because the rest of the United Kingdom isn't going along with them. They've hitched their wagon. Scotland and Ireland have hitched their wagon to Europe. So, and then puts them in a worse position because nobody, to negotiate a free trade deal takes 7 years. Mm-hmm. So they would have to crash out now and not know what's going to happen for the next 7 years. I mean, the economy will be destroyed by then. Mm-hmm. So I think this is what's going to happen. They're just going to have to follow this, and it's the end of an era, I'm afraid. I think it's, unfortunately, the one who's going to make out better in this is Europe. Nobody saw this coming, unfortunately, but 2 years later, this is where we are.
Vanessa, tell me what the locals are saying, like people that you talk to on the street in London. I know London and the urban centers voted against Brexit in overwhelming numbers. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the local daily newspapers there, the tabloids they've got in London, which are some of the best in the world that scream headlines, there's kind of 5 New York Posts in one.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Exactly. So what's this?
Well, it's a really divided and polarized country. I mean, there's some people think that this was a terrible mistake, that they should have another vote because the margin, this is all happening because 0.1% of the population swung the vote. There were mostly older people, not young people who are working. There's a lot of, people who will be living on pensions. Now, I lived in London for 11 years, and I used to be married into a political family. In fact, it was my former father-in-law, a guy called Bill Cash, who originally started the Brexit debate. So a long time ago, before Nigel Farage came along, he argued that it was a loss of sovereignty, that UK laws could be superseded by the European Union, where you had a bunch of people who weren't elected passing laws, and that wasn't right. Mm-hmm. So he made that argument to David Cameron, who was the leader of the Conservative Party, and the Conservatives had the vote and held the referendum that my former father-in-law had been pushing for years, and then it just sort of unleashed the hound.
Yes.
Then you had the far-right group, UKIP, with Nigel Farage, who's a friend of Trump's. They rose up. They took a few seats. Now they are in disarray. And all of the original architects of this Brexit are now, it's all taken a turn nobody anticipated. But what you see is, for people who back it, and even though really the cities were mostly, wanted to remain in Europe, you had some working class in what we call the Midlands, which is the sort of industrial center, the middle of England.
Right.
But you also had some very, very wealthy hedge fund guys, a very upper class, who viewed it as a matter of national pride, of sovereignty. so that they want out. And they are convinced that nobody beats England, that England will survive because it has that fighting spirit of like a Winston Churchill type, right?
Right.
So it's very much a nationalist sentiment in the streets. And it's like the one thing you can't discuss at dinner is Brexit because it's the most polarizing topic.
Everybody's got an opinion on it. Vanessa Neumann, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us today live from London. Great update. You can follow Vanessa on Twitter, Vanessa Neumann, Neumann, at Vanessa Neumann. Also go to her website, asymmetrica.net, asymmetrica.net. And Vanessa, what I'd like to do is once Tropics Trump is installed in power in January, your new president of Brazil, I'd love to be able to go there for a week and do my show down there with you. I think that would be a tremendous amount of fun. We'll have to get that worked out.
I can absolutely help you with that. That'd be a lot of fun. Let's do that.
It would be a lot of fun, and it would make national news. We could get a lot of good interviews on that.